Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I'm Julie Graham. Tonight's guest is fine art photographer Steve Giovinco. Steve documents landscapes shaped by climate change and humanity's presence in fragile environments. Working at night with long, sometimes very long exposures, he captures scenes in near total darkness. His photographs are in the collections including the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and the California Museum of Photography. Exhibitions of his work include at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Georgia, the Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati, the Winnipeg Art Gallery, White Columns here in New York, and Sadler's Wells in London. Steve is a Fulbright Fellow Alternate and has received numerous grants, including from the American-Scandinavian Foundation, as well as residencies and fellowships from Yaddo, the Ucross Foundation, and the French Ministry of Culture. And we will get some hints and tips about applying for these sorts of opportunities during the lecture. So let's have a warm end of semester welcome, please, for Steve Giovinco.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate it. Really great to be here. Let me just set my timer. Yeah, so my name is Steve Giovinco. I'm a photographer here in New York, based in New York, and going to talk mostly about night landscape photos, but as well as, don't worry, I'm not going to read all this, but talk about some early work and how that led me to where I am today, some of the process, and just like now that you have the work, what do you do with it? So getting visible with grants, residencies, and at the end, talk a little bit about building an AI presence, which I think is something we really need to work on and think about. So I'll talk mostly about Greenland, but I wanted to talk about some early work. And a lot of the work, this is actually a photograph of my brother, and sorry about the poor quality of the image. And this was made with a Rolleiflex, a square camera, which I loved, really loved that camera. But a lot of the early work was about kind of an intimacy or working with people that I knew and capturing like a moment where they're revealing themselves. This is also, while I was doing that, I was also traveling to other locations. This is actually Newfoundland, but photographing landscapes. This took me a while to realize that this third kitten, and actually might even be a fourth, but I'm not quite sure about that. But I initially took the photograph and in Palermo, and didn't realize, discovered what was in the photograph. So I think that's what a lot of photography is about, but especially mine is like I'm discovering what's in the work, what's in the frame. So I went to Yaddo, and if you all know Yaddo in upstate New York, it's a life-changing event. So I didn't quite know what to do. I was photographing some of the other people, made some landscapes, but then I began to work at nighttime. And I had no idea that I was going to do this, but this really resonated for me and really made a lot of sense. And I'll just pause on this one for a second, that this really encapsulated a lot of my work because it was sort of a cinematic setting. It had elements of nature as well as an artificiality. So a lot of the work, I think, I keep on coming back to this. In this case, literally, I think another time that I went to Yaddo. But I think that was a seminal photograph. And some other bodies of work also that I was doing at the same time were this couple on, this series on couples using myself and my then partner. And also, very interested in light and shadow. And so in this case, this is myself. And so I'm framing the photograph based on a tactile feeling of the sun on my face. So it's not necessarily, of course it's visual, but I was positioning my face when I felt the sun on it. And here you can see that's the edge of the tripod, which I don't think I even noticed until fairly recently that the tripod was in there. So what I do with the work is I have the tripod set up with the camera, and I'm living my life as you might do. And I never tell the other person to stop or to pose. So I'm kind of recreating a moment that might have just happened. So I'm kind of recreating, but then there's also an element of documentation. Documentation of a life or a couple or disconnection or connection. And I love how this came out, and I could never frame this or it would just look awkward or odd. And the same with this one. I would never tell her to stop or to pose or to look at her camera. It's a little bit hard to see, but I think she actually is looking at the camera. And I am walking off in the edge. And so I could kind of position myself and have a feeling for where I should frame myself. And I'll just pause on this one for a sec too. I love this one, just the sort of harmonious balance and the subtle tones and the color. And so in this one, again, she was just drying her hair with a towel. But I thought, why don't I'm opening my mouth, but I'm not saying anything for the photo. But I thought maybe this would change the narrative of the photo. Am I talking to her, or is this an argument? So there's some ambiguous elements in the work, and I just simply, was trying other things. Other work that I did, this was a while back, I did a project on Snapchat when it was first coming out. And it was involving my father. I won't, I'm just going to show one or two of different, I'm just going to run through a few of these different projects of work that was in different locations from grants and residencies. So this is in France, Wyoming in Ucross. And I love, by the way, you can see here, that's actually a town about 60 miles away. So you can see the glow of the town in the distance. Near Seattle. I photographed for a month inside an abandoned paper factory in Michigan. Wind farms in the Netherlands. And this is also the Netherlands where the moon is rising, but then these other streaks are planes that are kind of coming in. And both are being reflected. And this is maybe a most recent project where I'm working on, in Maine, photographing tide changes. So these were actually like 6-hour-long photographs, or some of these were really long. So it's kind of this in-between state. This was an area at the edge of the Bay of Fundy. So if you remember that from grade school, I don't know, or something like that, I remember hearing about it. And it was these massive 20-foot tides in like a tidal session or whatever. So we're actually seeing two states of low tide and high tide simultaneously in this one photograph. So I found that to be very interesting, and these long exposures are uncovering kind of a hidden world. So I'll talk a little bit about Greenland, and it kind of drew me, reminded me of like the Heart of Darkness, and like going into another place, going into another world, and sort of exiting one world and going into another. That was sort of the idea behind it. This is the Aurora Borealis that is just, you know, amazing. You can barely see, there's a falls kind of in the center. I love how you can just barely see the fences are being illuminated, or those rails are just being illuminated by the light. And this is a block of ice that's like maybe as tall as me that was just kind of left in this after a big overflow. I'll show you some other areas of this, but this is something that flooded like once a year. So this is like a massive river that just appears on occasion.
How many hours is this?
This is, these are probably much shorter, quote shorter, like an hour. And this was kind of at twilight, so you can barely see in the sky some of these, or one star or a few stars. And this is a settlement in Greenland. And just some ice that's just breaking off. So sometimes I would photograph during the day, but most of the time it was at nighttime. And I just want to pause on these two photographs. These are, and then I'll go on to another section, but these are photographs of a dead glacier. So they're at the end of their life cycle. So I was really surprised at how you know, craggy and dirty these are. It doesn't look like a pristine, you know, blue that's out there. It's really very, you know, filled with rock and dirt and that's been churning up from the bottom. And so I find this to be, and you know, the previous one too, these, you know, just surprisingly dirty, and maybe they're like microbes and, you know, some forms of life, but otherwise not. And just find this to be a literal and metaphor of what's happening in the Arctic, in Greenland. There's this churn, this change that we don't necessarily see, or that we can occasionally see. But so that's part of the work as well. But so I just want to shift a little bit and talk a little bit about the process. I moved on Friday. I don't recommend it. But that reminded me of going to Greenland, because it was such an intense physical and emotional process. And like, I, you know, hear these shots from the plane, and it's hard to imagine, but you know, the ice and the snow, or really the ice, is moving. It's constantly moving. It's really retreating or sliding or melting, but there's a lot of movement around it. And this is the airport that you land in. kind of ominous to have these abandoned crash planes like off to the side. So it doesn't really give you a whole lot of confidence, and it's maybe a harbinger of things to come. Also, there were sheep farms in this area, and so you'd be walking around and there'd be like bones and skulls just like sitting there. So it's very kind of odd, and like that's what it's like. So just some, pragmatic or practical things. So this is Greenland. This is Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, Iceland, and of course, so actually Iceland is fairly close, so is Canada, but really everything is coming from Denmark into Greenland. So and also everything in the center, the white is like, there's nothing. There's literally nothing. There's no roads. At the edge of the ice, or at the edge of the coast, there are some settlements, but for the most, and maybe you can go inland like 5 miles or 10 miles or maybe 50 miles, and there's no roads that connect any town. So it's either plane, boat, or helicopter. And so this was an area, this is probably kind of similar to like New York and New Jersey, except on, physically, but maybe a slightly different. So Narsarsuaq has a population of like 200 people, and some of the other settlements are like, 50 people. And so this is just a slightly different view. This is the ice that we were looking at was mostly here. This is the dead glacier, and this is the town. And then I was also photographing down here in Igaliku and also over here. So also in this kind of range or area. This is Peter Cooper Village or Stuytown. And it's about it's like 5 square blocks. You all know it or walk past there. It's probably about the population of this. So just to give an idea or a scale, and maybe even a floor of one of these buildings might be like the size of some of the settlements that that are there, that I went to. Or maybe half of this would be the capital of Greenland, Nuuk, like 20,000 people. This is a sheep farm, and by the way, on the right-hand side, you can't really see it, but this is a UNESCO heritage site, believe it or not. So there's Norse or Viking ruins that are off all over this area. And, they're just like foundations and, rocks and other elements that are from the 10th century that are just like sitting out there, and sheep are walking around. You can just walk around. You can, I guess, camp on them or near there. And just want to show, this was important to me. This was an app that I had on my phone where I could find and track where I'm going. So this became very important, especially working at nighttime, that it was hard to, like, where am I? Like, it's completely dark. So I could trace myself, also pinpoint places that I wanted to go back and photograph later, and also pinpoint, where I am, where my tent is or where my house is or whatever. I don't recall. What was the name of the app? I don't remember, but it was like a trail tracking app. There's a bunch of them. It's really helpful. So I just want to talk a little bit about the process also. So this is what I would see at nighttime. This is ASA 100,000. So it's like way up there. And this is kind of what I would see. So what I would do is come to a place, take a quick photograph of what's there, and then have a sense or an intuitive feeling of, that could be a location to photograph. And then this is what would emerge an hour later or an hour and a half later. So I had no idea that, I love on the right-hand side in the mountains, there's sort of like this light and shadow. There's this strange green hue in the sky. There's also some red in there. I could never see any of this, of course. So that's part of the process. And just the same with this one. It's a 100,000, quickly see, like, is this kind of in a frame? And this is the result. So a couple of things about this too is that there's some elements or connection to painting in the work. In terms of one, inspiration, that I would be very interested in landscape painting. Another is that in editing the work, I would be making dozens of corrections or changes. So for example, on this bush, I might be sort of enhancing this, or on this building, kind of bringing out some detail there. So it would be built up over time. And then the other thing, again, is relating to painting, is that it is, made at one time, and then it's made over time of like an hour or so. But then it's also another layer because I'm actually making changes to it later. And it's hard to see, but this is actually the same building, sort of a different location, a different position. This is the town, downtown Narsarsuaq. This was the airport, or this is the airport, and I think that's closing next week. So this was the main entrance point to Greenland. View from the window. Didn't find it too tasty. Places that I stayed. And like this building seems to be kind of latched down, so that's kind of an odd thing. And just one other point on this is that this whole area, at least where I was a former U.S. Army base. So it closed, I think, in 1955. So the whole reason for it existing now was to have the international flights and to have this town. But as I said, that airport is closing probably next week, I think. So they built another airport, a few other airports. So I imagine that this is going to be a U.S. Army base again, probably, because like the airport's there, and I don't want to talk about political things, but this could become an air base again. So I just want to spend a few times on a more curated, I consider this more of a portfolio of work that I call Trace. And that's the one that we saw earlier. And I really love, I always think of these as pods, but these are actually, bales of hay that are wrapped around, and they're probably about as tall as me for the sheep and the sheep farmers. And I think this is really representative of the work that I'm interested in, because it seems like there's a human trace or element that is trying to sort of tame or engage in the land, but it seems impossible, or it seems like a very, very hard task. And sometimes you can see elements of like old buildings or light that's artificial, and that also kind of reminds me of that first landscape that I pointed out of the tree earlier. And this I really love too, because it's hard to see maybe, but this is actually a children's bike. So it just seems to me like this is almost literally an attempt to sort of make a suburban element of this town of like 50 or 80 people. And there's like a bike there, and it's almost like it's illuminated by the street lamp and that is the world where it's kind of like this attempt to make this man-made place. But literally outside that light is just wilderness or primordial land or danger, or just the Arctic is taking over. So again, there's some of these sort of pods. There's that waterfall, and I walked and climbed up over that, and on the other side is the ice sheet, and the ice sheet goes for like 2,000 miles. So in all this work, there is an element, like I said, in this, except for maybe 2 or 3 images, there's like, here's a boat that's going by. So there's a trace of humanity. And often doing this work at nighttime feels very freeing and also very beautiful and also very terrifying. And it can feel sometimes like it's a walking meditation, walking around at night. And so again, it's very freeing, but it's also can be disturbing or challenging. So Julie asked me, like, what do I do when I'm out there? And so I often am trying to stay sane and listen to like BBC podcasts. And that helps, usually. And so this is, the road ends, this is maybe 2 miles to town, and then the road ends again. This is another view of this torrential river. I'll just pause on this for a second. Is that this once or twice a year is formed from melting ice that is coming from up above and from the ice sheet. So once or twice a year, the water melts and reaches a threshold and kind of comes over the rocks or the mountain and makes this into a massive torrential river. And so this is that same spot roughly like a week or a few days later. So it just kind of lasts there once in a while. And I'm also, love cinema and think of like Stanley Kubrick or David Lynch or The Shining, of just sort of like this painted, infused red land. And just this one, just to pause on this for a sec too, this is like something that I don't think I would know. I somehow love this photograph. I don't think I would normally take this photograph if I was framing it in a normal way. There's something that's very kind of almost references early photography, and there's something kind of awkward but also direct about it. So I kind of love that it's just kind of quirky or weird. So this is an exhibition, and just to show of how these would be, how I exhibited them at the time, is that I didn't have any frame or didn't have any glass. They were just exposed so you can be intimate with them, get up close to them. They're probably, the size of like 50 inches by 38 inches. So they're large scale and kind of can immerse yourselves in them.
What were they printed on, Steve?
They were printed on Sintra, I think, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So, okay, so the work is done. What do you do now? This is like a question that everyone has, or artists or photographers have. What do you do? And so I want to spend maybe 15 minutes or the last portion of this on like what do you do afterwards with the work. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but grants, residencies, I talked about a little bit, connecting, and spend a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes on like building an AI presence for your work. So grants, pretty obvious, like you want to do your work, they can pay you to do your work, that's great. But the other thing is that if you get a grant, then it's more likely that someone else will see like, oh, well, maybe we can give him a show or something. So that's part of, it's a validating process. These are some grants that you might know about. The American-Scandinavian Foundation is the ones that supported me for the 2 trips. Santa Fe Center, Meyer Foundation, the one at the bottom, is for emergency grants for artists. So that can come in handy. I think it was like $2,000 or $1,500 or something like that. So some of these you know about, some you don't. Excuse me. So I can't, emphasize enough how important I found that residencies were. If you can imagine like getting up in the morning, making breakfast, buying breakfast, getting on the subway, being annoyed, being pissed off, going to the your studio, even if you have a studio, that's, a residency takes all those out for the most part. So they feed you, they give you a place to stay, you do your work. You have a studio. It's fantastic. It's life-changing. I didn't know that I needed it, but it was really helpful. But the other thing is meeting other artists. So I know some filmmakers, I know some painters, but I didn't know a lot of other people like composers, for example. And I found working with them or talking to them like at dinner time, it was like a roundtable dinner afterwards, after the day. And like, oh, editing, oh, maybe that's like composing in some way. And selecting work is like editing fiction or nonfiction or, other things that are, that I just found to be so helpful. And meeting with others and getting a fresh view of things. So this is just this is what I'm doing. So this is my Google Drive. And so I have a separate folder for each thing that I'm applying to. This is something that I was applying to as a residency. So what I'm doing is taking exactly what's on the website, copying it, pasting it. And so I really want to use the language that they're using, make sure that I'm following what they have, and make sure I'm matching what they're looking for. So here, I just maybe highlighted a few things. For example, deliver a free public program. Okay, I better make sure that I mention that in my application. Look at the grants and the previous winners. Take it with a grain of salt because the jury's changed, so it could be something that's completely different later, but it's helpful to do. And I always go to Creative Capital, Colossal, and NIFA for sources, but it's really Creative Capital, and they have a section there for grants and residencies that I go to, and I'll talk more about this. The other thing that I do is I just like reach out to the grant or to the residency place and ask them, like, what are you looking for? And of course, they're not going to tell me like what, hey, here's how you can like win a grant. But it's helpful to know like how competitive it is, or are there better times to apply when there's less people? Or are there, how many rounds are there for juries, or like any tidbits like that can be really, really helpful. And they're usually happy to answer some of these, most of those questions. Also, when submitting work, don't do a best of kind of thing of like one from each year, one from each body of work. Have a cohesive portfolio. This really applies for everything. Explain it like I am 5. Avoid art speak and just like, applaud that, that is, just like look at the work, like what is in the work? Describe it. Is it, what are in the photographs or what is in the work? And then explain it to me like as if, like you're bumping into someone on the street. How is it made? Do you have a tripod? Is it photographs of Greenland? Is it photographs of your family? And just keep it really simple. Follow instructions, that's obvious. Oh, the other thing is don't wait till the last minute. Always try to do an application like a day early. I've had problems where like something happens and like the site is down or something. This is an application to a Guggenheim. Okay, once submitted, like celebrate. Like this is a major thing, like when applying to a grant, like that's a major accomplishment. So try to, be happy and also forget about it. You can't do anything, enjoy yourself. And I mentioned this too, like grant writing or any kind of writing about your work is always in flux. So I got the best statement that I've ever had. This is fantastic. This describes the work completely. And that was like 10 years ago. And I've like changed it like 10 times over every time I give a talk or do something. I get informed like, oh, this is really what it's about. So it's always in flux and embrace it. Don't get angry, or if you get angry, do it for an hour, a day, or a week. Try to keep it under a week if you can. It's normal to be pissed off, but you have to pick it up again. So just talk about some other ways to connect and advance your career. Openings, connect with people, connecting and going to openings. Really, really helpful. I see, curators there, other artists, other friends. It's really fantastic. Frankly, until recently, I hated going. And like, why am I, this is terrible. Like, I don't want to see people. The work is terrible. It sucks. But I go. And I finally have gotten to be where it's actually enjoyable and it's interesting. And so bring a card or a postcard to hand to someone, and then if you do talk to someone and do take their information, follow up with them immediately, like the next day. Hey, it was great to meet you, and just keep it very simple and very brief. APAD is next, or in a few days, and this week, so yeah, like
Wednesday.
there you go, Wednesday, yeah, so go. And again, I felt the same way for decades, like I feel terrible about going, why isn't my work there, but it is a place to go and to imagine your work on the walls, and that's something that I would do. And also take cards of where you think there's some alignment. And another major thing is at talks like this and book signings. I found that to be, so helpful to meet people. I met, curators afterwards going up to them and say, hi, this was great, and build a relationship that way. But there's really no magic solution, be everywhere all the time. This is also kind of a pain. This is kind of disappointing because That means you have to think about it kind of all the time, and it's kind of a mindset. And sometimes it feels like I'm negative or this is a negative time, but it's important to be open and to be, out there with the work or out there as yourself as an artist. So just some materials, you should all have this. Just briefly, some of the materials that are needed. I'm not going to go through these, but again, keep it really simple. Keep flowery language out, keep it brief. That's how I try to do it. I did a postcard for this talk, so postcards. Another material that's needed is websites, so I'm not going to go into detail about that except to keep it simple and fast. Keep it simple and fast. Instagram, again, not going to go into that except to say, this is a place where you can, instead of saying like heart emoji, maybe write a thoughtful comment. And, once in a while, or as often as you can, once a day, oh, I found this, I discovered this work 20 years ago and I found it inspiring and it led me to a different path or something like that. And so engage with the dealers or with curators and do it with that same but honest, don't kind of BS things. Reddit is really important to be on it and to be posting and to be reading it. There's so many different subreddits out there, and I'll talk a little bit about that more in a sec. Pinterest, it's not just for brownie recipes. There are actually galleries that I see posting artists' work on there, and it is indexed by Google. So that's important to have a presence there. Metadata, briefly, title, description, text. Make sure that you have your key search terms, right, embedded in the metadata, right? You all kind of hopefully know what I'm talking about. And have your name as well as the kind of key search term in everything that you have in the metadata. So again, all of these things could be hour-long dissertations in itself, but just to go on some highlights. So again, here's an example. I'm not going to read this, but I put this into Gemini, and this is what came out. And so the strike-through are things that I pulled out and, deleted or changed or whatever. But it did a pretty decent job of making metadata. And while we're speaking of that on Gemini AI, I prefer Gemini over ChatGPT and others. That's just my preference, but I think it is really helpful. So, it really helps me with summarizing grant requirements. I can copy and paste something in there. Proofreading, spell check. And again, I'm talking about this paid version. There's hallucinations and other problems in free versions. So I would avoid that if you can. I pay, this is the most expensive Gemini Ultra or whatever, but it's, I find it worth it because it's an assistant that you can have, that you can, be on the level of a major artist or, have kind of an intern, or in some cases maybe an assistant, again, with what you're doing or have a high level or a paid version. So I just want to emphasize that. But so, again, I'm not going to read this, but so I had, for this lecture, I wanted to invite some people or just say that I'm giving it, but some of the people, for example, are on my mailing list are participating in APAD. So I wanted to send a slightly different email to them. So what I did is I put the list, my whole list, in there, and I said, look for the APAD website for the list, and then if they're in that list, give me who those are, and that's what these are. just happen to be 13. And then, if not, give me another list. So this was a way that I could use to filter out or make custom emails and, a whole bunch of other things. And just want to spend a few moments on this. And this is what I call a digital catalog. So this is everything that you have as an artist that people can, that people need about you. So this is an example. So on the left is one page, and that's kind of a description. On the right are a few images. Same thing on the left are a few images. And then the right is just, bio, dimensions, contact, simple. This is what you can do to send to people, and they can have information ready for you. The other thing is, it's crucial to embed photos in an email. This really, I guess, bothers me, but don't make it as simple as possible for people that are looking at your work. And also, people are not going to click on it. Is it spam? Is it a virus? So put it in the email. I break things into these three groupings: people you know, people you kind of know, and people you want to know, and send them slightly different things. So I only bring this up because, like, for example, the last category. So for example, I was going to San Francisco and I said, let me reach out to a curator, a photo curator, and said, hi, my name is Steve Giovinco. I'm a photographer. I'd love to introduce my work to you. Can I send you a digital catalog? And they said yes. So I think it's it was simple and seamless. I'm not bombarding them. I'm asking them. I'm not spamming them. And so that's, I find, helpful. And you can do it with curators, cold email them or contact them. And after everything that you do, this is an opportunity to reach out. So, and this is kind of close to the end. I just want to spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes on this. Post-internet. I only use Google now for, like, is the restaurant open tonight or something. Otherwise, I don't really use it. Dead internet theory, we're probably in it or we're coming close to it. So that's where half or more than half of traffic online are bots and not significant or pertinent to humans. So if you've been on Facebook, you can get a sense for that. It's like, what the hell is this crap? So I think we're in the middle of that. So it's important to pivot to ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity, being found on those. And actually, Julie and I were just talking about this earlier, about being found and how, like, this is the new internet, essentially. And this is a whole massive topic in itself, but just really, really bullet points, how to appear. And also, I have a patent pending process of how I've done this, and I've been successfully able to do this and have sort of another life to do this. But we spoke about Reddit briefly before, but this is a source of scraping. I think it's, I don't remember if it's Google is paying for it, but or ChatGPT or both are paying Reddit to scrape the information. So if you have a presence there, or if you have images there with your name and the metadata, you have much more likely chance to be found. .edu sites are very powerful. And again, talks, blogs are really important. And also you can give human feedback and say, hey, this is wrong in a response. So this is just briefly also something that I have, again, in my paid version. So I'm always using something called Deep Think. And what I do is I have again, for this paid version, what I could do is create my own kind of profile. And so what I've done is I've put in my own CV, bio statement, articles, everything that I can in Gemini. And so what it's doing is it's basing answers based on what I've put in. So I find that really, really helpful. Again, think of it as an assistant or a tool. This is just my opinion, but I found it to be very helpful. Forget about image making right now. This is like a way to be efficient and have like, a non-paid, paid assistant. And so this is remembering what I am about. And, again, I'm not going to read this, but I just typed in, tell me about Steve Giovinco. And so this is in Gemini and not in the paid version, but this is accurate. And these are references you can't really see, but these links here point to particular references. So kind of surprisingly, all of this is accurate. So I've been working on it, but so this is key. This is an article that was about me. Okay, last slide. So this is all fantastic in the to talk about at a lecture, but like what's the real world? So I'm checking creativeartist.org like monthly, trying to post and leave comments on Instagram. I do naturally go to Reddit. Actually, I do it a couple of times a day, but try to leave an image every other week or something. And again, if you know Reddit, like they don't mess around. Like if you're doing some spam, you're going to get called out or even like your account banned. Try to go to events and talks, plan projects. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, you showed a picture, very grainy. Obviously, you said you don't really see very much. And so I'm wondering, not seeing much, what are the things, what is the process in being able to sort of know what the 2-hour exposures are going to be? Or is there things, do you go there in the daytime and sort of scout the location? Just kind of wondering about that process.
Yeah, actually, I forgot to mention one part of the process is that I'm going back constantly, sometimes during the day, but also at nighttime. So I'm taking a photograph. I'm seeing like, that if, sorry, I'll just go back here quickly. If I'm going back here time after time or going back to like this one, so I might have gone back here a couple of times over a week, but usually I go back time after time and take a photograph and say, oh my God, this is interesting. There's a moon there. I didn't know, I don't know what's there. And so I came back and tried to imagine where to best frame it. And also it's an intuitive feeling by now of like almost, standing in front of a place, and it's hard not to feel that at these places that I go to, too. Like Greenland is, amazing and magical. So you can also kind of easily feel that, or at least I do, and pick that up.
I assume that your main light source is the moon, correct? Is that part of your intentionality as far as how you position, pick your locations, knowing that the moon, or timing and so on and so forth? Is that fair to say?
No, not really. And actually in Greenland, the moon was, at least that particular time, the moon was very low in the sky. Sometimes I like to time it, but or kind of get a sense for it. But oftentimes I don't really know or don't really care because something else interesting probably will come up. I had no idea that light, for example, in this one, that light would be kind of flowing, the red light would be almost, streaking across the land, or even the other ones. but now I kind of have a sense of, oh, this is something might happen here with the light. So it's, I'm very interested also in natural light as well as illumination from, a man-made light source. And I don't exactly know how that's going to, how either will kind of illuminate the place, but that's also part of the process too.
I really appreciated the structure that you put around your photography in terms of like your online presence and reaching out to grants and such. How much of your effort do you think that you apply to that type of part of the work? And then what opportunities and outcomes have you directly traced to that effort? Just saying, like, if you're posting on Instagram once a day, you're like, this is, yeah.
Yeah, that's challenging to figure out. I don't really know, and in a way, I don't care that much, except that, like, I just care about one or two people. Like, if a curator sees it, it's not like we're dealing with widgets or, ice cream or whatever, like we're trying to sell a product. So, but I do try to be mindful of that. And again, just to go back to Reddit, is that I can see a lot of traction, and also Pinterest, some images have been getting, in the past, lots of traffic. But I don't know if it leads to actual activity in terms of, grant. Well, for me, not like sales. I've heard of other people, these stories anecdotally of like, oh, I mean, not the people that I am with. Actually, I did sell one thing online maybe about 10 years ago or a while ago. But so it's part of the idea of like, I'm active, I'm out there. Think of me like, oh, Steve is, posting something again. Hopefully it's like, oh, well, okay, he's, doing his work. That's interesting. Let me keep him in mind or something. That's kind of the idea that I have around it, if that makes sense.
Anyone else?
What's the time frame of your trips to Greenland, and how many times have you been there?
Yeah, so I've been there twice, one in 2016 and then 2021. And 2021 was really challenging because there was COVID, and I had to fly directly into Copenhagen and then fly from Copenhagen to Greenland. And also my phone broke while I was there, so I had, it was like a complete nightmare. But so normally what I try to do with most of my projects is that I spend, I apply to a bunch of different things. If I get it, then I begin to do more research on the place and do, like, for example, when I was going to Michigan, when I was there and also beforehand, I did a lot of research on like the paper factory and like, oh, wow, this is, there are links to New York or, and so I spend, weeks or months kind of working on that, take the work for a month or so, come back and edit it for another, or let it sit, and edit it for another select the work, maybe a couple of weeks, and then another couple of weeks of editing. So the whole process might take, a year to actually do, but doing it with other things in mind.
For the recording,
What's the relationship?
just for the recording, so to speak up as well.
What's the relationship in your mind between gallery shows and sales online, or across, because of the show, despite the show? In other words, what's more important, to sell a print, to have a show, or something in between?
Yeah. I guess I could say that probably, I mean, I would be more happy to have an exhibition, to have like a one-person exhibition, I think, rather than, yeah. But of course, having a sale is important, and then that's something you can say like, oh, this was successful, and maybe that can bring more people and more attention to it. It's a little bit hard to say, but I think an exhibition is still like the realm of the game or whatever, however you phrase that.
Anyone else? Questions coming? Last call. All right. Oh, one more from Liam. Hang on.
Obviously, the climate change is a huge part of your work, a theme part of your work, and I'm just wondering, is there, I did see ice and so on and so forth, but I'm just wondering if you could speak more specifically about the intention as far as that's concerned, that's sort of running through your work and so on and so forth. Just a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I usually go to places where I feel like there's a change happening or about to happen, usually a climate-related change, but kind of loosely defined. So when I went to the Netherlands, for example, of course, there's, I was really fascinated with the idea of these, windmills and other infrastructure that's designed to sort of counter the climate change. And of course, they're very aware of it because like they could be flooded in a second. But so I think these are sort of background thoughts, and the main kind of concept, I mean, I'm interested in the climate change, but I think I'm interested in the idea of change and the idea of like a metaphor, like these are metaphors, a literal and figurative metaphor for change and shifting and a dynamic elements that we don't normally see maybe or think about, or maybe if we do think about it, we don't actually see the places. One thing I wanted to do, because I happened to go, I was planning on doing something else, but because of COVID, I actually went back to a second time, 2016, 2021, to the same location. And I could see real differences between those years of where the ice was then and where it was like 5 years later. I could see it. I'm not a scientist, but you could see it really did retreat substantially. And I don't quite know exactly how to manifest that, or to, I don't know, if it's too simple to say before and after, or I don't know, but it's all part of the work, if that makes sense.
But it's fair to say you're writing a little bit more about it as part of your process now too?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. Sometimes like I said, I do a lot of research before a project. So if it's Greenland, or, I'm looking at, and actually I do try to partner, like when I was there, with scientists and other students who were there and that can tell me more ideas about like, what are they doing and what are they seeing? And that helps inform the work. Also, I would go to some of the sheep farmers and they would tell me about how the land is changing. One thing I wanted to do was to go to East Greenland, where there's a giant glacier that's the fastest retreating glacier, I think supposedly in the world, where you can actually see it move. It's retreating at like a few inches an hour, maybe, or an inch an hour. So I'm really fascinated of like seeing that and making a long exposure photograph of seeing this, something that's normally very detailed, to be into a blur, as if we're watching like, I don't know, a child run down the street. That's not the right analogy, but like something in blur.
Just a quick comment. The two images that kind of had the climate change and the retreating glacier all in them, to me the most, were the sort of dying glacier ones. And the sort of stuff coming up that's been churning around in the glacier for a long time. And what they actually reminded me of is snowbanks in the city as they melt, because that's when the dirt from the city comes up too. And I found those really interesting photographs, both because they were kind of like local, but also global in my reaction to them. I don't know about other people's reaction.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm just trying to find where they. Yeah, I think that that's kind of an interesting point, and because these.
Those to me are the really strong climate change ones.
Right. Yeah. I agree, and it was really shocking and odd for me when I went here. And just one other thing that was very eerie. I mean, there's thousands of things that I could talk about, but this churning kind of ice, and then when I went there to this location, there was like this churning sound, like a thumping, that was underneath the ice.
Are these night shots?
This might be during, I think this is night. Yeah. But sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to mention that there was like almost like an elevator room or like a submarine, I don't know, or something, this mechanical thumping. And that was an a river underneath the glacier that was flowing underneath. And so there's this whole subterranean world that's there. And it was just very eerie. And again, it sounded very, sort of mechanical and just disconcerting. And also just one other thing, on the other side of here, it's hard to see, but there were sheep farms. And so there'd be like baying of sheep. And so it's like this really surreal, like you don't see them, like, there's this weird thumping sound. There's the aurora borealis going on. There's this strange dark ice. It's just like this cataclysmic, almost, strange world that's there, that's happening.
Great. One more back here.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. It's
We'll just wait for the mic, please, for our recording. I'll come to you
my
next.
question is less about photography than I guess most of us are concerned about climate change, right? But at the same time, we all become fans of AI. How does that go together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess it's like, I don't exactly know. I mean, there's problems, massive data centers use up, of course, resources and water. And at the time, I remember the, quote, small data centers, maybe 10 years ago, were in Iceland. And they were there because they didn't require the intensive cooling that was needed elsewhere because of the climate. And so that was a location for data centers like 10 years ago. Yeah, not sure.
Okay. Just for the mic for our
Oh,
recording.
thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to just shout out. I just wanted to ask you if you could identify scale here, because this is a
Oh, yeah.
particularly challenging, in that image in particular, this one.
Yeah, it's a little, yeah, right. This is a little bit hard to see. This is maybe, I would say these kind of protrusions or rivets or ravines or whatever might be 6 feet tall. So you really can't get a sense of scale. Yes, it's really hard to see. But yeah, these are, and these kind of individual, sections might be like this big, I guess, something like that. And I was up above maybe, I don't know, 50 or 100 feet above looking down too. So it's really hard to get a sense of that. And this going across here was, again, pretty far. I don't know if that's like, yeah, I'm not sure, but it's, yeah, substantial.
Last call. All right, let's give it up for Mr.